Welcome to the Chicagoland Guide. I'm your host, Masliansky. Today, I am sitting down in the Village of Skokie Village Hall with Johanna Nyden. Johanna is the Community Development Director here, and this is also my former place of employment for many, many years ago when I was an intern for the village, and I'm also a resident here for many years. So thank you for joining me.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, Johanna, I saw a post that you had on LinkedIn recently about, all the different types of costs that communities are coming up against with infrastructure, housing, all these different types of things. And I'm like, my God, we need to sit down and talk. And because I feel like you live it every day and you have great perspective that I want to be able to share with the audience. But before I do that, give us a little bit of a background of, how you came to this role and how you know so much about it.
Okay. So years ago, I wanted to be a physical anthropologist. I studied physical anthropologist. I studied dead things, dead people, dead past human cultures. It was fascinating understanding paleopathology, experiences of how people lived in spaces, particularly medieval Europe. And something clicked senior year of college where I was not sure I wanted to go get a PhD and take the academic path, because that was sort of the path that you had to take if you were continue to be interested in those things. And I had an internship where I learned about how the built environment impacted the health of people. When you have places you can walk to, short distances, long distances, bus, transit, bike, walking, all the things, how the way in which we design our built environment impacts people's health outcomes. And this was over 25 years ago at this point. I was just fascinated. I fell in love with this idea that, gosh, I love learning about how past human cultures lived, but I could help move the needle on current human culture and current ways in which people live. That if you can advocate to get sidewalks in places or bike routes, give people more access to transit, that they could be healthier. We were starting to come upon at that point the obesity epidemic,
Sure.
that there were ways in which we could change the influence. So I ended up pivoting from thinking I would go get a PhD in physical anthropology and started looking at urban planning programs. And so we happened to be home in Chicago to one of the top urban planning programs in the country, UIC. I had been working at a not-for-profit. I'm sort of paraphrasing a couple years here. Worked at the not-for-profit for a couple of years and then went to school for city planning at UIC, University of Illinois, Chicago. Got my degree, was laid off in the Great Recession after working for a development consulting firm for a little bit. That was a transformative experience unto itself, being laid off and humbling. And this job in Evanston opened up. And I was like, okay, I'll go do that for a couple of years. I'll see what working in local government looks like. And I absolutely fell in love with it because no 2 days are the same. You get to help. At that point, I was working in Evanston. That was the community I had grown up in. I had a great city manager that I was working for at the time. I really enjoyed that experience, and it turns out I was pretty good at what I was doing. So So I started off as an economic development planner.
Okay.
Then I was promoted to manager, economic development manager, and then I was later promoted to community development director. So by the time I left, I was leading a department of about 35 or so, and then the job in Skokie opened up. And after about almost 13 years in Evanston, I was ready for new challenge, new community, new opportunities.
Yeah, and there's so many differences between the two communities, between Skokie and Evanston, but there's so much that is similar. And obviously they border each other. My original podcast, Inside the Skev, really kind of leaned into that. What are some of the things that you notice that are the opportunities that you can find here in Skokie? Because sometimes, you look at Evanston, you have the lakefront, you have a real downtown with a lot of transit there. So how do you translate what was working there to what you've been doing here in Skokie?
So I think that the big things that I see here is, I was sort of thinking, I like rinse and repeat. There's some things that are similar. We're
Sure.
geographically super close, but the things I see that are different, but also the things that I think work here is people have a lot of pride that is probably untapped: civic pride, community pride. There's things that you talk to people. Skokie's an intentional choice. They love Skokie. Evanston's an intentional choice. People love Evanston. The identity that people have around their version of who they are in Skokie, the different sub neighborhoods. I think that's something that's been a real nice opportunity to try to build up and help identify building the Main Street corridor. We have corridors. We have less maybe neighborhood business districts that are surrounded by transit, but we have these corridors that reflect different patterns of development. Old Orchard continues to have new iterations of development. The pocket of offices that are around the Old Orchard exit on the Edens, that's transforming. We have the Henry, we have Old Orchard Towers being transformed to residential. The multi-use path that's coming through, that is there's a transformative neighborhood that is going to look very different when the residential coming to Old Orchard. It's going to look very different in the next 5 to 10 years. And those are the kinds of opportunities that, I didn't necessarily get at Evanston because Skokie has such strong placemaking potential. We were founded at a time where, sure, the car was important, but it wasn't as king as it is as you move further west or southwest. We have this compact nature that can create this place for walking, biking, and cars, and maybe even transit.
Right. And we also have areas that can be transformed, like the area around Old Orchard. So like the Henry was the former Portland Cement offices. And I mean, they were looking to sell for a long time, and it ended up being housing, and it's a pretty good use over there. And then you have the different offices that are more antiquated. Yesterday I was with the Chicago Association of Realtors. I'm on this global real estate council, and every year we do a development tour. And this year was more on economic development around Chicago. So we went to Inglewood and saw an area that is being redeveloped by a community organization. Then we went to the United Center and saw what's going on with the 1901 project, where they're going to be really transforming all those parking lots into a whole nother neighborhood. And then we went down to the Loop on LaSalle, the Fields building, which was the Marshall Fields offices. And half of that building at least is going to be transformed into apartments. So that's like a microcosm of what's going on because of just the changing pattern of development. And I feel like in Skokie, we have a lot of those same things. Like you could just do a tour around Skokie about all the different changes that are taking place because we have that space. And one of the things that is such a challenge right now, I'd say, in my line of work, being a real estate agent, is housing prices. And that has just been, the talk of, international news about housing prices and inflation, how things are so expensive and you can't find anything. So where do you see the opportunity of what Skokie is doing? And I mean, we're talking about it with these apartments, but like, how do you see things playing out?
So I think Skokie is incredibly attractive right now. I mean, I think I said it in my interview. West Elm has done, there's probably the West Elm effect. People like the mid-century modern, the post-World War II look. Mm-hmm. They're into it. They like the bricks. They like the split level, the open floor format that is kind of already inherent in that living. So Skokie's well positioned for that experience. So we see homes that are available for 5 minutes or don't even make it to the market because somebody in the neighborhood. People love where they live. They really love where they live. I look at how many block parties come through Skokie. People love, and I see pictures. I don't directly involve myself with the block parties. That's a different part of the organization. But people are so proud of their block parties. They love to come together as a community. They love what happens. And so I think what I see is that people really, they're craving that community experience. And much of what Skokie has to offer, it's set up well for that because people want those things. And so they want to stay in their home or they want to stay in their neighborhood. So when homes open up, there's intermoving within those spaces without even being open up to the broader market. But one of the things that our updated comprehensive plan, housing chapter, which is the plan that gives us the vision for how we want to see ourselves in the future, that plan talked about making sure homes are adaptable and buildable and flexible to the changing needs. So one of the thoughts there is, a lot of 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses. How do people who have a couple kids, maybe a home office, how do you live in that space?
Right.
How do you add an addition? How do we not make it it's an expensive process to begin with. How do we ease some of that tension and strain from the building and public side? We want people to invest in their homes. We also want to make sure that people don't come away from the process feeling like they had to have a second or third job to function to build their home out to be their dream home. It didn't come at a emotional toll or cost. So we're working to figure out how we do those things too.
Right. I mean, definitely part of that is just the reality of construction costs. And I think that's something that people, when they go and buy a house, they don't realize also that the infrastructure is old if it's an old house. So you have old sewers, you have old water lines, you have old electrical. So like there's quite a bit that needs to take place if it hasn't taken place already by the previous owners.
Yeah.
So, and also I know that like a lot of people are talking about the missing middle and how communities don't have that, where basically a lot of towns were master planned in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and you didn't have like this natural iteration of, okay, maybe some half duplexes, some townhouses, apartment buildings, condos, like just a mixture. And Skokie, I feel like, does have that. I mean, Skokie is very much has
We
the middle
do.
housing.
That's right.
How do we increase that? How do we and what are some of the different programs? Like, you're trying to make it easier for people to come through and make those renovations, but what are some of the things that Skokie's talking about doing?
Sure. So it's interesting you brought up the missing middle. If you look at our zoning map compared to many other suburban, inner ring suburban communities, we have far more multifamily housing districts than most inner ring suburban communities. And so one of the tools that the advocates for missing middle housing are trying to deploy is require multifamily zoning in more extensive multifamily zoning. We have it. So the challenge isn't necessarily solved by zoning more missing middle housing. It is a financial one. It's how do you bring down the cost? In Skokie's case, we think a lot about how do we provide rehab dollars for townhomes and some of those two flats that were built quickly after World War II, or those fourplexes. Those are great apartments. Those are great starter spaces. We know anecdotally some families own them, and they often different parts of, grandma and grandpa live in one, mom and dad live in another, adult son, daughter live in a different one. Those are great opportunity spaces. Those are great ways to help people build equity and wealth. But we also know that spending money on those spaces is not as easy and routine. People are doing the minimal work to keep those things.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
they get, the scary, oh my gosh, my sewer lateral has collapsed. I have to replace it. We have lead service lines that need to be replaced all throughout Skokie. People are making decisions about whether they would want to do that or not proactively, or as the village comes through, and we can do a cost share approach as we replace the water lines. We have the ability to help people replace that infrastructure. But I think one part for us, for Skokie, adding the missing middle is helping provide rehab opportunities. So those 2 and 3 flat, fourplexes are attractive to making those nicer, weatherization of windows, more energy efficiency. Some of those properties have very clear lines to the sky and would be great for solar panels, or at least solar panel ready. But that's a very expensive endeavor if you are just somebody who owns a home and you're trying to balance, like, what do I spend money on right now, and the cost
Right.
of construction, or where even to begin. Because how many of us homeowners decide, gosh, I guess I'm going to like kind of be a general contractor, to find the right person to do the work. So that's a pretty big lift. I think also being open to the idea that townhomes and some of those smaller lot homes and housing styles are totally acceptable, and they're actually the way people want to live. How many of us who have a little yard or whatever are just encumbered by maintenance, lawn
Right.
care, upkeep of outside spaces is not necessarily in the cards for some people who have 9 to 5 jobs or travel or families, and that's a challenge for people.
Right. Like, I mean, personally, I prefer not to have that to deal with and have a
Right.
better house and have an
Yeah.
attached garage and things like that
Right.
with newer, relatively newer infrastructure. And I think that that's something where, I see so many of these houses where I walk into them and they maybe were updated, but like not the real parts. I always ask, like, okay, like, did they do the sewer? Did they do the water? I look for it. And the better thing almost would be if these if people would come in, developers would come in and say, okay, I'm going to buy these 3 houses and I'm going to build 6 townhouses right here. And then you have something brand new. The people who own the place are able to get out, because many times it's people who've lived in the houses for 40, 50 years and they don't know where to go. And, I think that's part of it. Like, we have such a lockup of inventory, and it's not just Skokie, but like, okay, if I'm going to sell my house that I've lived forever, I still want to be in this community. Like you were saying, people love being in their neighborhood. So it's like trying to find those opportunities to be able to build single level living where people can move to, and then be able to utilize that land to be able to create more opportunities for people that have housing in the area. And there's, so many different places. I mean, some of the schools in the area are going to be closing, because they're part of the Evanston Skokie school district. So like Bessie Road. So that's an opportunity, but other things around the area too, that could be possibilities for the future. And I think I don't know if there's ways to be able to do it where, sure, giving money to people is one thing, but having case studies for people to be able to follow and because you said most people are not general contractors and they're trying to figure out what to do. And they may hire somebody and not do something in the right sequence. And then they're doing the work twice or not being able to do it again. And they don't do it right the first time. I mean, so have you seen examples of where people are able to get onto that right process?
So I think it's tough because there's also the example that I wasn't here at the Village yet, but at Church and Crawford, there was a plan for a condominium development.
Yeah.
And that did not work out. They couldn't get enough pre-sale for those units. Is my understanding. There was enough pre-sale, and there were some challenges to get that off the ground, and it ended up turning into a lovely dentist's office. And
a beautiful dentist's office.
No, it's a beautiful dentist's office. No offense to all the wonderful dentists in Skokie and around, but that could have been what particularly for the community, the Devonshire, Timber Ridge, Skevinston community, they need to be within the E-roof. And so the multifamily housing style where they could live in a condominium, a multi-level environment, that is very attractive to parts of our community. And so that does feel like a missed opportunity. But we do have these intersections and corners and these corridors, Church Street, Dempster, that do lend themselves nicely to some of the more multifamily living, or even some larger properties that might work well for more multifamily housing, or even small lot housing is a great opportunity also for some of the larger properties that could house maybe two homes, 3 homes, and people can still feel like they have that house, but they don't have the overhead and the frustration of a larger property that would otherwise take up a lot of time of yard work and other maintenance, but they can still live in that residential style house. I think you and I talked about before this, where my family lives sits right across the street from a multifamily housing property, and the dynamic and the multi-generational nature of that kind of neighborhood. And so I think sometimes we focus in on density and cars and other things that aren't so great that might be detractors from the creation of multifamily. But I enjoy living in a neighborhood that's multi-generational. We have some older adults that have been able to live in the community. They can walk to the nearby park and enjoy the walking path there. And it feels like a richer community because we think about that.
Right.
The one big challenge we have is our infrastructure is very old in Skokie. So as we start to think about how much more water fixtures and sewer lines we tap into some of those, that becomes concerning from the public works standpoint. Like how well is this going to manage this impact? But I will say over 50% of Skokie is zoned for multifamily residential. So that we have that desire and that setup. We can do those things here. It's set up for that. It's just making sure that our infrastructure is set up to manage that impact in the long run.
Yeah. And I think a really good example of infrastructure being impacted is a couple of years ago when the water for all of Skokie was shut off because of a huge water main break. And I see that Skokie has been proactive about trying to fix these things since, even before then. And things happen. They're older. I think that water main was built in the 1960s. It was supposed to last even longer than it did, but sometimes pressure goes a little bit higher than what's expected, or who knows. I was talking to somebody who used to work in the water department and telling me why sometimes these things happen. And so and then you look at, I don't think anyone's talking about building a data center in Skokie. We don't have the land or electricity. It's more on the outskirts, but infrastructure is such a big topic right now because of electricity and everything else. So how does the community grapple with that? Because it's so expensive. And one of the things in newer development communities, you have separated stormwater and separated sewer systems. And Chicagoland area mostly was built before they did that. And you have combined stormwater sewer. And we've been building this massive project called TARP. It's the Deep Tunnel Project. It's throughout the entire Chicagoland area. And you've got these big reservoirs that are down near Midway Airport and other places in the region. meant to be able to handle that overflow, but still you get backups. I mean, we had massive rainstorms recently, and I see the disaster companies outside people's houses. So, and a lot of houses are built without overhead sewers, which helps prevent
Mhm.
backflow, and they have flood control systems, and God knows how many people actually maintain them.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so how does the community deal with those problems?
Well, I think one, we have to understand that we're all part of a bigger region, and good reference on the deep tunnel project. These entities, our water reclamation district offers tours and open houses at these facilities. I would encourage everybody to go learn more about where your water goes, where the things that when they leave your house, it's not always pretty. But as a local government professional, I've taken those tours, and it's very interesting. And you do think twice about running your washing machine or your dishwasher or taking a shower during some of these larger weather events, because we are sending everything down through this everything's going through a combined system. And that has real impacts on where the water can go at the end of the day. Even if you think, oh, my yard, there's a lot of, and the overhead sewer, we definitely encourage people to do it. The village actually offers a rebate program to reduce costs for that.
Oh, really?
We do,
Oh,
yes.
wow. I just learned something. That's awesome.
And so we're doing the best we can to try to bring forth opportunities to help people maintain their properties in these changing times, but better understanding of how we are as a region. The MWRD does promote. I'm gonna
Oh,
mess
the
up the
rain
date.
barrels.
No, not that. The day, like water. It's like a water action day. When these large water events are happening, they do encourage the system to use less water
Hmm.
on those days. And I'm not saying, I mean, that's not a great solution to a broader problem. Like I'm not telling your listeners to not take a shower or do basic like life functions with water, but just think twice about everything is the rain that you see on your street that's flooding your street. You may be inadvertently contributing to that when you run a load of a half load of dishes in your dishwasher, or laundry that could wait a day or two to run. So those are just some things to think that I would encourage people to think about. But I think also the local governments owning and making sure we're staying on top of things, because sometimes it's not so great to have to hear like our infrastructure is aging, we're gonna have to deal with some problems. I think Skokie has been very proactive about saying what are the things we have to deal with, and how are we going to deal with it? How do we make a long-term plan for fixing those things? And so what our ability to go and investigate what did happen with the water main break, and then understand how we go and prevent it after that happened. We went and found two other spots where that was a similar connection, and we replaced those with the connection that we knew wouldn't fail, because we were concerned that we might have a similar situation. So we went and did that, but we also take stock of what we're doing. In community development, we have gone and did an assessment of our building permit and inspection process. Brought an outside consultant to come and give us feedback on our processes, to how we can improve and what we can do to make it better. And we just received that report last month, and we presented it to the village board this past Monday. And it has 83 recommendations for things that we can do to improve our internal customer service to each other, but also the external customer experience and inspection processes. So we are best in class. We are bringing forth a Skokie that is accommodating an aging building infrastructure, that is accommodating the needs of tomorrow. And so we're looking forward to putting those recommendations in place. It's not always a comfortable experience to hear what you're not doing right or what you could do better. There's a lot of things that but we also got reinforced on the things that we are doing right and the things that we are doing well, and how we can improve what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's important. And, I want to talk about two things. One, with the infrastructure, the key thing is that it's going to cost more, right? And I think that people get upset when their taxes go up, or you have to pay more fees or things like that. And there's always ways to streamline, for sure. But, sitting from a position of where I live, I have the glorious position of the president of the homeowners association. And
Congratulations.
oh, thank you so much. And we do reserve studies, we update them, we look at our finances all the time. And we know what infrastructure within our complex we're going to need to do. And then there's the things that just come up. And we set aside enough money to be able to pay for them. And there's always people who complain, why is it going up so much? It's like, well, the buildings get older and we need to maintain it. And then I see other complexes just through my day-to-day work where they don't pay enough money in their assessments, which is like real estate taxes. and they don't take care of their buildings. So I think that it just has to be a realization of we need to be honest with ourselves that there are increased expenses. So if things go up, you have to be able to pay for it, or we need to find new revenue. So the fact if there's new buildings that come up or things that are revenue generating that don't necessarily tax the residents, or we bring more residents in here, and that those are permit fees, those are impact fees that do go and help pay for things, and then you're updating the infrastructure around those developments too. We need to get behind it as long as it makes sense. I mean, there's a big YIMBY movement, which is yes in my backyard instead of the NIMBY. And I think that those types of movements are really important in order to be able to have progress and be able to maintain and improve quality of life. And the other thing too, when you're talking about streamlining and trying to figure out how your systems work best, I was reading something yesterday about how the United Arab Emirates are looking to converting almost all their government services into an AI system. I mean, still having employees and everything, but streamlining through that. So AI is basically in every type of conversation right now. Where do you see that for like permit submittals and being able to help, your permit reviewers to be able to get things expedited?
Yeah. So, and we're open to seeing where these tools could help us.
Sure.
We're gonna be Luddites stuck in pencil and paper. I think the challenge we have is infill development, greenfield development works really well from what I have seen. And I will say local government planning, permitting operations are just in this very early journey of what could AI do for us. The challenge we have is you have an infill property. You don't necessarily know all the things about the property in the way you might have a greenfield development in the middle of nowhere, a large cornfield where you're building 250 homes, single family homes. The inputs there and the information of a new construction when there's nothing to grapple with. But how many of us have worked on a project or done something where we may do all the things, and then next thing you know, we open up a wall or you start digging in a hole. You're like, where did this come from?
Of
And
course.
so there's always those challenges and we started, I think before we started recording, we were talking about the institutional knowledge of organizations and how you can't really replace the institutional knowledge of people who know about things. Or in Evanston, there was somebody who I'd worked with who was a plan reviewer who had been there for closing in on 30 years before he left. He had reviewed permits he had a steel trap, might have had a photographic memory, but his permit review was so good because he had seen things over the years and he could remember particular properties. And this is when we still had permit files and other things. He knew his craft so well, and human beings really appreciated that he knew stuff, and he could be a human and say, oh, I remember when this came in for, when the kitchen renovation of 1982 was here, and now you're doing the 2012 one. I think that customer service touch in a world where we're heavily reliant on phones and other disconnected technological things, when people are making their biggest investment in their home, having a human being that can say nice things and help them through the process is really important. But from a completeness check and to making sure that permit submittals, there's things that we can do, completeness check being, did you put your plat of survey? Did you give your contractor information? Some of those paper moving pieces, if we can bring AI in to help us with some of those, or somebody can upload some plans and say, am I meeting code? The challenge I always worry about is if AI gives an impression and then we go and look at it because they may have the inputs weren't correct as not being the technical person, the outputs we may have some disconnect here. Almost like you have two reviewers doing this, and where we have local amendments to building codes, how that gets tricky. But if there's a way to help get a project more complete, so we have a more complete submittal, which might reduce the rounds of resubmittal. I'm always concerned about adding too much technology to something and frustrating somebody. How many times do we hear, I just want to talk to a person, like just person,
Sure.
Those automated phones are like person, operator, you just want to, like, I have a simple thing. I just want to, and so I don't want to create this over technology thing that could dissuade somebody from feeling good, and how people can feel connected in that regard, because this is a big investment. And to your point earlier about maintenance, they're recommending it used to be 1% of your home's value to set aside for repair and rehab and maintenance. They're now, industry experts are saying it could go to 3 or 5% of your home value because the cost of everything is just climb up. And
Right.
so the things that we're trying to do just keep getting more expensive.
Yeah. And I think, increasing the revenue or the potential for revenue for your home, like, even like allowing ADUs. And I know that the abundant housing plan that the governor put forth is allowing ADUs in every community, accessory dwelling units. And, that's another way to be able to either have, somebody in your family live there or rent out the space. And, I know that there's a lot of controversy on whether or not short-term rentals should be allowed and going back and forth on that. But those are other ways to be able to produce more income to be able to afford your housing. So there's quite a bit to be able to figure out as a community development director. I'm sure you're thrown into all these things and there's no one answer to things. It's nuanced, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think the specialness of a place like I've never had a professional desire to work in a far-flung place. I like the challenges of inner ring, built-up communities because you can try lots of different things. Our housing policy work is not one size fits all. We can't do one thing or the other thing. We have to offer the full slate. So we are exploring zoning ADUs. We don't know what the governor's office in the state of Illinois is going to do in terms of where that bill will go, but we have heard loud and clear that people are interested in accessory dwelling units and having that flexibility to make that investment on their property. To the extent that people will take advantage of that, it still remains to be seen of what people want, because I think they want the flexibility to be able to live, whether it's their adult child or maybe a separate office space, so they can still leave their home and
Right.
go someplace, shorten their commute time. But I think there is interest in just having more housing flexibility for all the things, and aging in place. You might have a caretaker who lives on site, an older adult that could live in there too. But it's still, we had a pretty lively discussion about ADUs at our plan commission recently, and there is still a concern: are we solving an affordability challenge here? Because at the end of the day, if you're building a brand new ADU, you're looking at $500,000 to build effectively a new house, because you still have to bring sewer and water and foundation. You're not necessarily doing a full-blown basement, but you're still bringing in some very expensive elements of the property. And so those might be making sense for somebody who's weighing that. Am I doing an addition to this house, or am I doing an ADU? Like that addition might be $500,000, but the ADU might
May
be
also be
something
$500,000.
but it might help you live in a way that you want to live in your house going forward. So it comes to be choices and how you want to, if you want to stay in your home for a long time. I was talking to somebody recently about weighing, do I want to do an addition or do I want to go buy a new house? Will my addition put me upside down in terms of my mortgage and my addition and the true value of my home, or is it going to be something where I'm better off just buying a new house? But to your point of, if you're investing in if you've already invested in new electric and new sewer and new water and some of those expensive elements, gosh, it makes sense to maybe stay put, because you don't know what you're getting when you buy a new house. What are those elements? And I think we're seeing longer term holding of property too, in terms of people staying where they buy and they're there, similar to pre-recession. People they can't flip and move to the next thing.
Well, because they're also stuck because their interest rate is likely so much lower, and
it's like an opposite problem.
Yeah, it's so crazy. It really stuck the inventory, and that's, I think, one of the constraints that people don't realize. It's kind of invisible. Why aren't things cheaper or whatever? And it's there are market forces that took shape because of all these different types of things, and you have all these aging infrastructure type issues. And one of the things that I think that some communities have done is reduce the restrictions that they have on what people need to build. So if you're building, a 4 to 6 unit building, maybe you need one stairwell instead of 2, or not having to require fire sprinkler systems or things like that. It does reduce the safety, I'd say. There's reasons why those are part of code, but I know that some communities are doing that. They're rolling back some of these things to make it easier for people to be able to build less expensively. And I'd say, those buildings, even without those types of things, are still way safer and healthier than the old buildings that were built in the 1950s.
Yeah, and I will say the fire chief and I have had extensive conversations about some of those recommendations, and we are definitely on the same page of we don't want to see reduction of some of those stairwells and the sprinklers, given the path of running into a building to save people and rescue people, and the counterflow of people trying to get out, and the emergency personnel. I know that is a real concern in the fire safety service, and we have that concern as well. I think we're open to opportunities to help bring down the cost of housing.
Yeah.
But in terms of doing it in the position, particularly of those of us who are in the code enforcement and other spaces, I really want to find some other way, some other lever or button to push to make a house more affordable than to do it on the backs of a potential safety issue. Because for those of us who have had emergency situations and that being able to get out of your home pretty quickly, or even our firefighters going into places where they're running into the danger, making sure that they're doing so in a place that is protected and well sprinklered. And some of the new construction, the sprinklers aren't necessarily the most expensive thing. It's sometimes upgrading the water service that's going into the building.
Oh yeah.
And so we recommend 1.5 inch of water service regardless. And some of the homes in Skokie only have 1 inch. So you're gonna have, if you're gonna add a bathroom or another washer and dryer, you probably are gonna have to upgrade that.
I always tell people that. I'm like, you're not just adding a bathroom.
Right. You're adding more.
20,000 plus.
But
Yeah.
the thing that people may not realize is but the sprinklers often get the bad rap because they have to upgrade the water service for all the other the fun parts, this kitchen, the new kitchen, the extra bathroom, the washer and dryer, or whatever they're adding. These newer spaces might have a shower and a bathtub,
right,
and a double sink. That's driving the investment in that infrastructure. It's not necessarily always the sprinkler. If you do more than 50% of your home, you rehab more than 50% of your home, you may have to do that. But maybe don't rehab more than 50% of your home if you don't want to do sprinklers. These are choices. But the sprinklers do save lives. I understand there's advocates and people who see that this is an extra cost burden. I completely understand that. But the challenge, I think, those of us who are in the code enforcement world, I don't ever want to sit here 20 years from now and learn that something that I provided a recommendation could hurt somebody in the community I've served. And so the stairwells, when you talk to the people in the Fire Prevention Bureau, they have a lot of really interesting and meaningful stories of when they needed to get into a building and that second stairwell saves lives.
Yeah, no, for sure. And maybe there's other ways to do it a little bit less
Absolutely.
expensively, but giving them both of those. So, just mindful of time, I want to just ask you, if you had a magic wand and you could fix whatever you wanted to fix, one thing, and for the future of Skokie, what would it be?
Oof. I think the thing that I would want to fix for the future of Skokie is helping people is finding that if I have a magic wand, maybe I have a magic bucket of money or pot of gold or
Whatever,
something.
sure.
I think finding the resources, because people very much want to stay here. And how do you invest so people can stay here and invest in their homes, but also they don't have to, the cost of things we know is outpaced the cost of people's income going up. And so how do we fix some of that mismatch so people can stay in their homes? People can stay in their homes. We often talk about building more affordable housing or providing services for people who have found themselves homeless or sporadically homeless. The best way to invest money is helping people stay in their homes when they are in a home. And when people are at risk of losing their homes or not being able to, even if it's not as dramatic as somebody is, I'm thinking more of a situation where somebody finds themselves over-encumbered with property taxes, of maintenance. They've gotten upside down on some of those things that they find, and they have to move to a less expensive space somewhere else. And it may be to another lovely community around here, but it's not their choice and they want to stay here. Their family, their friends, their school community, their religious community may be here, and for them to have to uproot and go someplace else because they can't afford the home that they have lived in and existed in and built, been part of a community. I want to see that part not happen and find ways to reduce housing cost burden and find ways to make sure people can continue to be part of the great Skokie we have.
Yeah, I hear that for sure. Well, Johanna, thank you so much for your time and sharing your insight.
Thank you for coming by and talking and visiting your old digs.
My pleasure. Thank you.